I know we did just publish our 10,000 mile 1 year update for our F-150 Lightning, a truck we nickname Ortegas. And it's time for another staff vehicle update here on the channel. You get two very close to one another, but there's a good reason for it. Namely, things have been happening with HEMA, our Vectrix VX-1. Why don't you join me and I'll explain all that's been going on. We are starting at the rear, where you will notice the rear lights are back in, the rear trim piece is back in, and the trim panels are back on. That's because I did manage somehow to get the rear light working again. If you missed the last update on this channel talking about the bike, you may not know that the rear light stopped working, and inside this light cluster there is a little printed circuit board that controls whether the bike displays the regular light or the brake light. And it takes 12-volt signals from the bike, but this is all LED. And the problem with that is, while it's very nice and very futuristic to have a discrete circuit board, when one of the components fails on it, you then have to break out your soldering iron. And it wasn't particularly pleasant because I can solder, but I'm not great at it. I broke out my rework station. I used a hot air gun to remove the broken transistor. Thanks to some of you amazing people watching and also in our Discord chat room, I was able to pick an appropriate replacement transistor, a more modern one that is more capable, that is a little bit faster to switch, has more power transfer capabilities, so hopefully this won't fail again. And I basically broke out my soldering iron and put it back together again and tested it. It all worked. Here's a video of me showing that it works, filmed on my mobile phone. I apologize for that. But it works, and while the bike doesn't have a battery pack in it, I was able to hook up my 120-volt DC power supply, which is just at the low end of what this bike is happy accepting as DC power to actually engage and turn on all the systems. So I was able to prove that all the indicators work, the brake light works, and also the position lamp works. So that is great. Now I have put this back together for now. I am considering putting the J1772 charge port right here on the back of the bike. Obviously this bike came from the factory with basically a 110-volt charge cable. This is the charge cable right here. It's not going to be able to charge the bike up particularly quickly, so I'm going to be replacing that. And so I want to use a J1772 inlet. Now, I suppose I could go with an AXE inlet and put an AXE inlet on. I don't really want to put an AXE on my vehicle. I'm not convinced that an AXE is actually going to stick around for very long as the standard outside of Teslas. So I want to use J1772 on this, partly because most of the time I'm going to be charging this up at the house and we have J1772 inlets or chargers. So that makes sense for me. So the first place to put it is here. The second place would be up here, and to modify this trim piece that goes at the front of the bike to have the inlet in. Unfortunately, unlike the European Type 2 Menencez connector, which you can actually buy in a recessed form that just has a little screw cap, and it looks fantastic, the J1772 inlets all come with like a protruding bit. And I don't really want to have protruding bits on the back of my bike. So I need to figure out how I'm going to house that and put that all in. But that is a future Nikki problem. That is a future Nikki problem. But with this all on, I can also tell you that I have picked up a mount that will allow me to put a top box on the back of the scooter. Top boxes are great. They're a great way of keeping your gear safe. Obviously, you can lock your helmet away in them, so you don't have to carry your helmet if you're on a trip and you park up. Technically, my helmet should fit in here, but I have a big head and I have a big helmet, and I don't want to scratch my big, expensive helmet, so I'm going to buy a nice big top box to put on the back. and I'll put my helmet in there. There's a guy in Europe that still makes a kit, and I will link to it in the down below, that enables you to use the official factory mounting points for your top box bracket, but I will have to modify this trim piece because I don't have the piece that was made when this bike was made. They actually made special versions of this trim piece with holes in so that you could mount the top box. I don't have that, so I am going to have to drill that. Unfortunately, that is the way it is. The next thing I want to share with you all, and if you are very eagle-eyed, you might have already spotted it on the bottom of the bike, is that we now have two ways of supporting the bike when it's stood still. Right now, the bike is on the side stand that it came with from the factory. It's a traditional side stand, so you kick it up, you know, when you come to a stopping point, you knock your side stand down, then you angle your handlebars and just make sure that the bike is nice and sturdy. The problem with that is that this bike is kind of heavy, and I have dropped this off a side stand before, thinking it was on the side stand, and the side stand I'd kicked it down, and I'd kicked it down so hard it had bounced back and then folded up, and then when I got off the bike fell over. So I have been getting ready to put this on the bike, and I did it at the weekend. Now, if you've watched other things on the channel, you would have seen that I bought this center stand from a group purchase in Spain, I think it was. And now I have a center stand for my VX-1. It is basically a copy of the factory part. The bike came from the factory with the bolts and the holes needed to mount it. It was an optional extra that you could buy when this was being made in the US. Not that many Vectrixes were originally spec'd with a center stand. Now, aside from this being more sturdy and you can keep the bike upright, I also find it's harder to knock the bike over, and it also keeps the rear wheel up off the ground. Now, this is really useful because if you don't ride the bike a lot, it stops your rear tire from getting, you know, those spots where the bike is just sat for a while. So not only does it mean that the rear wheel is off the ground, which means I can actually run the bike and check that the rear motor is operational if I ever need to do any work on it. Also makes it easier when I want to do things like replace the gearbox oil. You have to replace the gearbox oil in the center of the hub. The motor is actually part of the rear wheel. It was fairly easy to put on. We got it powder coated at a local place here in Portland. They did a really good job. Unfortunately, when they did powder coat it, they actually made some of the holes a little bit too tight. So I had to go in with a Dremel and just widen the holes back out, put some nice grease on it, torqued everything up, and I put it on at the weekend. The hardest bit was putting the springs back on. It's got a double spring arrangement. Putting the springs on was an absolute nightmare. There were some other things going on with the bike, and a couple of weeks ago I did a road trip. So I guess it's time to explain where I went. The question of what type of battery has been answered. I will admit it wasn't planned per se, but one of you wonderful people who watches this channel, you know who you are too kind. I do not know what we have done as a channel to deserve your kindness, but made a donation that allowed me to get the batteries to put in here to make this project a reality, and I'm blown away by your generosity. Thank you. In Europe, it's really, really common to use Volkswagen MEB-based batteries. So specifically the ID3 and ID4, they came with a 54-ish or 53 kilowatt hour nominal battery pack in their base trim, and those batteries have modules that are arranged in 12S2P configuration, and you can fit 3 of those modules into this battery area in the bike, and it works perfectly. The voltage works out right, you get a great capacity battery pack, really, really good conversion, simple, easy. In North America, while Volkswagen didn't sell the ID3, it did sell the ID4, still does, but it doesn't sell the entry-level pack that is available in Europe. It sells higher capacity as its entry level, and those higher capacity battery packs have different modules in them with different cell arrangements. Technically the modules are the same, but the way that the battery cells are connected together are different. So in North America, you can only get battery modules from ID4 and similar vehicles that are configured in 8S3P. So instead of 12S2P, they are 8S3P, and that means the voltage is different. You can't fit enough of them into your Vectrix to get the right voltage to operate the bike. So most people don't do that over here, and obviously shipping an ID3 module that is correct all the way from Europe, it's a nightmare, especially right now. Which leads me to the Nissan LEAF battery cells, which is also a very common conversion that people do. Now there's another Vectrix owner here in Portland, Oregon, who has actually used modules from a Chrysler Pacifica. They fit, but the capacity isn't so great. And they have basically replicated the original range of the bike when it was new and had nickel metal hydride. I want to expand the range, which is why I have decided to go with Nissan LEAF modules. Now, if you have been following the EV world for any length of time, you'll know that the Nissan LEAF has now been in production in some form or another for 15 years. It's hard to believe. It's now in its 15th year, soon to enter into its 16th. And the original Nissan LEAF battery modules, well, A, they don't have very high capacity, and B, they're getting a bit long in the tooth. Now, great friend of the channel, Ben Nelson, go check out his channel, I'll link to it below. He had one of these, still does, he doesn't ride it anymore, and he did a Nissan LEAF conversion many years ago now and put in original Nissan LEAF cells and got about 93 miles of real world range from his bike, which is far more than the original nickel metal hydride real world range, which was closer to 40 miles. I could have just found some good condition old Nissan LEAF cells and put in, but the capacity of those cells is starting to drop, and it wouldn't have been great value. So I wanted to find third or fourth generation Nissan LEAF cells, the ones that were used in the 2018 and newer Nissan LEAFs, the one with the 40 kilowatt hour or the 63 kilowatt hour battery pack. And I found some. This is a third generation Nissan LEAF module. There's actually multiple battery cells in here, and they are arranged. There are 4 cells per individual module, and there's 2 modules in this canister. And the cells are arranged in 2S, 2P configuration. So 2 series, 2 parallel. There are effectively, therefore, 4 separate battery terminals that you can pull power from. And when you connect these up, you have like 14.7 volts nominal, I believe. More 14.8, depending on who you ask. But 10 of these, believe it or not, fit into here. But I can put 10 of these in, and it almost looks like it was designed specifically for this. So I picked these up from Sacramento a couple of weeks ago. That's what that big long road trip was about. And these battery modules, while they are Nissan LEAF spec battery modules, have never been in a Nissan LEAF. They've only been used in a static battery project with wheels. So there's a company called FreeWire. I don't believe they're around in the same form that they were at the time that the batteries were originally put into the device I'm about to tell you about, but FreeWire is known for making fast charging stations for EVs that, unlike most modern DC fast charging stations, can be used in locations where the power grid isn't necessarily very good. So normally to run a DC fast charging station, you need to have a really high amount of power that you can connect your charging stations to. And what FreeWire did was they came up with a solution which was to use a battery module inside the charging unit that acted as a buffer. So perhaps where you wanted to put a charging station, instead of having a 100 kilowatt peak power supply for your unit, you maybe only had 50. And so FreeWire offered an ability for you to have your fast charging station and for it to pull a more constant power from the grid to charge up a battery pack. And then when a customer came with an EV, it was capable of using the power stored in the battery packs to supplement whatever the grid could provide, and you had a more expeditious charging experience. These batteries weren't used in those big charging stations, and there are still some in the wild today. These were used in a previous iteration of a project by FreeWire, and that was a portable charging station designed for fleets. The idea was there was this box on wheels, about twice the size of this bike, that you could move around and then use to charge vehicles without moving the vehicle. It's like a mobile battery-based charging station, and these were used in that. Now, apparently, the units that these batteries were in used Nissan spec battery cells. They weren't used in anger per se. They didn't have a particularly high cycle life on them. And when the company hit hard times, they were sold off. And the person I bought these from purchased the mobile charging stations, pulled them apart to use the batteries, and here we are. Now, he had, interestingly, he drove a Ford Focus EV, previous, like a 2012 Focus EV, and enjoyed it. And he had some ideas for projects. I think he used some of these for an off-grid solar project for his parents, and then he sold the rest off. When I picked these up, all of the cell modules were at a reasonably low state of charge, and they still are. They're about 3.35 volts now. I've brought them back up to 3.35. They were all above 3 volts, with the exception of one module where some of the cells were like at 2.99 volts. Normally 3 volts is considered the absolute lowest. They had just self-discharged. They hadn't been drained to that point. So I know that the battery cells are okay. I have brought all of the cells back up individually to 3.35 volts using a power supply that I have, very, very low current, just to trickle them back up to what you would normally consider a low state of charge. And then I have picked up some all thread, which I'm going to use to compress the battery cells or the battery modules together in 2 groups of 5. So I'll have 5 modules clamped together and then another 5 clamped together. The reason I have to do that is I can't fit, as they stand, I can't fit a 10 block together into here. I have to put a 5 in and then scoot it up and then put the other 5 in. I know that these will fit because other Vectrix owners have done a similar thing with the same spec batteries. The total voltage of this is going to be 148 volts nominal, which is higher than the original battery for this bike. The original battery was somewhere around 125 volts. Don't quote me on that because I haven't looked at the specs in a while, but it will be higher voltage, but that's fine because this controller back here is capable of dealing with that higher voltage. This has all been made possible by one of you amazing people who has effectively sponsored this conversion. You know who you are, and I am very, very grateful. I do not know from where this kindness came from, but thank you so much. The batteries themselves were just under $2,000. The chargers are about the same, and I did have the money for the chargers, and then we switched our payroll at the beginning of January. We were using QuickBooks. They were absolutely nightmarish to deal with. They got worse and worse and worse and worse. I know other people who run businesses who have the same issues, and the too long didn't read is that when we switched over from QuickBooks to our new payroll provider, who was better and awesome, QuickBooks decided to still take payroll tax, and the federal government's not going to give that back. I've tried contacting them, they refused to talk to me about it, and so about $2,000 of payroll tax has gone missing. Apparently I will eventually get it back as a refund, but with what's going on in the US government right now, who knows? So I'm still kind of in the process of raising the funds I need to buy the chargers, but when I can, I will be putting 2 brand new chargers in at the front here. The original 1.5 kilowatt charger still works, sort of, but obviously this battery pack is going to be about 15-ish kilowatt hours, maybe 12 kilowatt hours usable, which is much larger than the 3 to 4 kilowatt hours of the original pack. So trying to charge this much capacity off the original 1.5 kilowatt charger is not great. I also need to buy a battery management system that's compatible with these cells, so it all works out. The other thing that's really cool about this particular setup is that the Nissan LEAF battery modules didn't always come with these posts on them. In fact, if you buy a Nissan LEAF battery pack and take it apart and take the modules out, some of the modules will have these posts and some won't. But because these were purchased from AESC, that's the company that made these modules, the client, FreeWire, asked that every battery module had these posts on, presumably so that it was easier to carry the modules around. They do still have the holes in them, which is what I'm going to use. I'm going to compress it with the all thread. But the other thing that FreeWire did that was non-standard was they had these wonderful multi-layer PCBs made at great expense. I understand that these PCBs are good for about 250 amps, which is good because that's more than the current that this bike is going to pull. So with any luck, I'll be able to use these interconnects as they stand while connecting all the modules together. And each of these has got this wonderful little pin out that I'll then be able to use to connect the battery management to. So it's going to look amazing. Now, back to these posts. Obviously, when this is sat in the bike, all of those modules are going to be exposed in some way or another. Obviously, there will be a cover that goes over the top, but I want to have a durable, mechanical cover that will fit over these and ensure that nothing falls on the modules and causes a short. And for that, I'm going to be able to make a 3D part that will literally bolt on using these standoffs and keep the cover safe. Now, I'm probably going to use ABS or some other high temperature plastic, but that's a part I need to design and prototype in the next few weeks. But it does mean that hopefully when all of these modules are in, everything will be properly isolated, properly tied together, not too much in the way of vibration. Some people put a mat on the bottom. I haven't decided if I'm going to put like a little foam mat on the bottom just to keep things vibration free. I probably will. And then the other thing I have to do is make some new high voltage cables so that I'll be able to tie everything in. So the project's moving. It is incredible to think that this bike has been sat for over a year now, but we're starting to see progress. And with any luck, I'll be able to have my first ride with the new battery pack before the end of the year. And I have set myself a bit of a goal. I'm going to regret talking about this, but what the heck. So my goal is to get this on the road and functional before the end of this year, specifically before the end of the summer, because I live about 75, 80 miles away from Mount Hood. Mount Hood has a J1772 charger or two in its area. And I think it would be great fun to ride this maxi scooter that originally had like a 40, 50 mile range at highway speeds all the way out to Mount Hood, ride it up to Timberline Lodge, and then ride it back home again. Am I bonkers? Probably. Is it going to happen? Well, you're just going to have to make sure that you hit subscribe to find out. Thanks for joining us today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord room, on our Patreon page down below, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube. That allows us to cover our bills, pay our team, and also ensures that we remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. We've got options available across a wide range of different price points, starting from $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters, Eric Mora, Jordan Roy, Joseph De Viver, Scooted, Rennie Schweiger, Robert M, and Lev P. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame, and you can now even gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have a good old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at for the time being, address listed below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you're someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so that we get the commission instead of Jeff Bezos. So we can continue to focus on making our content even better and reduce creator burnout. We're being a little freer with our release days, but plan on dropping new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on our main channel. Plus, on a Sunday, you'll find something over on Transport Evolved Take 2. If you want more, the algorithm that hates us thinks that you should watch this video, but we also think that this one is well worth checking out. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving.